This lecture we're going to talk about how urine is produced. As we've previously mentioned, primary urine generally gets altered in volume and composition before it's eliminated. Most of the water will be reabsorbed into the blood plasma, and solutes can be reabsorbed or added back into the urine as needed to maintain balance. And again, this is how kidneys are going to regulate the blood plasma, which is the main role of the kidney. Remember that the urine production is the byproduct of this. Urine is produced in the nephrons, and the epithelium of the nephron is going to change along its length. Here is an unfolded nephron, and you can see there are some thicker areas, this proximal convoluted tubule, this thinner area, the intermediate segment, and then this area here, the distal convoluted tubule. Some of these sections of the nephrons will have ion channels, and some will have transport proteins. Some will also have aquaporins, which are water channels for the water to diffuse through. Each distinct section allows for the reabsorption of water or solutes out of the tubule fluid or secretion of more solutes into the fluid. These secretions are generally under hormonal regulation. In humans, the definitive urine, the final urine, is complete when urine leaves the kidneys and enters the ureter. In many animals, solutes and water can still be exchanged after the kidneys in the bladder, the cloaca, which a cloaca is when an animal only has one opening for all waste elimination and also reproductive exchange. And some animals will have other structures as well. Let's take a closer look at how definitive urine is produced. We're going to use the amphibian nephron as an example since they have a very generalized nephron. Nephrons are microscopic in diameter and macroscopic in length. There can be hundreds of thousands of nephrons per kidney. The nephrons will feed into a collecting duct. Here's the collecting tubule and then the collecting duct here. And that collecting duct will connect to the ureter and convey urine to the ureter and then the bladder. Remember that initially glomeruli have a high filtration rate, higher than is necessary for continued pH and osmotic regulation. This is so that the kidneys can constantly maintain balance at any given time. Therefore, there is a need for reabsorption of water, sodium, and chloride in this process. As sodium and chloride are reabsorbed, fluid will stay isoosmotic with the plasma because water is also being reabsorbed. About 20 to 40% of the sodium chloride and water in the ultrafiltration are eventually reabsorbed. Glucose is also reabsorbed, but this is more variable. Amphibians are going to store urine in their bladder, but they can actually also adjust the volume and the concentration of their urine in their bladder, unlike humans. Here is a nephron all stretched out. You can see these single tubule of nephrons coming into one main collecting duct, and then that collecting duct will drain to the renal pelvis, which will drain to the ureter. Kidneys have two main parts to them, or three main parts actually. They have this cortex, this outer area, this medulla, this inner area, and then this renal pelvis where the urine is going to collect. The cortex is going to contain the Bowman's capsules that we've talked about and parts of the nephrons. The medulla will contain the rest of the nephrons, the collecting ducts, and most of the vasculature so that the blood plasma can diffuse directly into those nephrons. Mammals have added sections in their nephrons that create these hairpin loops. You can see that down here. and these are called the loops of Henle. These are also found in birds as well. These loops of Henle are arranged parallel to each other and allow for urine to become more concentrated and hyperosmotic than the blood plasma. Reptiles and amphibians lack these loops of Henle and cannot produce hyperosmotic urine. Mammals, birds, and insects can, and this opens up new habitats and new ways of life. Here you can see a loop of Henle. These aquaporins, again, is where water can diffuse into or out of that primary urine. In this section here, you can't, there's no aquaporin, so no water is going to move into or out of the urine in that section. The flow of ultrafiltrate, or the primary urine, is going to begin in the Bowman's capsule, and again, that's up in the cortex here. And then that fluid is going to travel down the proximal tubule, the proximal convoluted tubule, and that is also in the cortex up here. Then it's going to flow down this loop of Henle, which is in the medulla, and then it's going to head back up to the cortex into the distal convoluted tubule, again up in the cortex, and then it's going to enter the collecting duct and travel through the medulla down into the renal pelvis, where it will exit the kidney via the ureter. Animals in freshwater environments are going to lack long loops of Henle and cannot concentrate their urine. These animals, like beaver, muskrats, hippos, are going to have pretty small medullas. The thickness of the medulla can be equated to the length of the loop of Henle, and it is a ratio compared to the overall size of the kidney. An increase in relative medullary thickness is going to equate to long loops of Henle, which will also equate to the ability to concentrate urine. Concentration occurs in these loops. The loops of Henle are oriented parallel to each other. Initially, the fluid in the loop, and you can see that up here. Again, this is the primary urine, or that ultrafiltration. This fluid is going to be isoosmotic with the fluid around the loop, and this is called the interstitial fluid. These are going to be isosmotic with each other, the same osmotic pressure. Then active transport using ATP is going to remove solutes from this inner loop here that you can see, and it's going to move those solutes to the interstitial fluid, creating hyperosmotic interstitial fluid. Then this happens in the next loop, creating even more hyperosmotic interstitial fluid. And this keeps repeating. You end up with a concentration gradient in the interstitial fluid from the top, closer to the cortex, to the bottom, closer to the renal pelvis. So osmotic pressure will increase as you get deeper into the medulla, away from the cortex. You can see that in this final interstitial fluid of this loop of Henle down in number 8. As the primary urine moves through these loops, it becomes isosmotic with the interstitial fluid. As the interstitial fluid concentrates through this active transport, so does the urine. By the time the urine exits the loops of Henle into the collecting ducts, it is also isosmotic with the interstitial fluid and in balance with the animal's needs. And animals can regulate the concentration of urine during this last pass of the final loop of Henle. And the tubular ducts can regulate the aquaporins, so water can leave the duct or remain in the duct as needed. And again, this is just showing you the osmotic pressure. And as you move from the outer area of the medulla to the inner area of the medulla, that osmotic pressure is going to increase. And then finally, when that urine exits the final loop of Henle into the renal pelvis, it is going to be at the osmotic ratio that is necessary for the body at that time, and it will also be isosmotic with that interstitial fluid that surrounds it. And then again, those tubular ducts are going to regulate the aquaporins, so water can either leave or stay in the duct as needed, and that's going to happen in that final nephron. The final loop of Henle, the nephron. Freshwater and marine fish make for an interesting comparison of this. Freshwater fish typically have relatively large numbers of nephrons and well-developed glomeruli. Their glomerular filtration rates are relatively high because they have an excess of water that must be excreted in their urine. In comparison, marine fish tend to have relatively low numbers of nephrons and small glomeruli. They also have a low GFR, which makes sense in animals that face desiccation and produce relatively little urine. Reptiles, including lizards, snakes, turtles, and crocodiles, have nephrons similar to the generalized amphibian nephron that we discussed earlier. Birds have two types of nephrons. Some of their nephrons are similar to amphibians, and some are more mammal-like and can concentrate their urine to be hyperosmotic to their plasma. Insects use their Malpighian tube to form urine. This was discussed in digestion, and the Malpighian tube arises right between the midgut and the hindgut, right in this junction here, and that Malpighian tube is going to be bathed in hemolymph, and the urine will be osmotic to the hemolymph. So this whole area is going to be surrounded in hemolymph. Remember, we talked about that open circulatory system. And insects actually will use their rectum to modify the volume, composition, and osmotic pressure of their urine.